Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and a continuing series on MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and we're back at Nintendo 64 because it is not Labor Day weekend in Germany. Robert felt like working, and we have two new features added to the core. Both are absolutely incredible. One I love and one I use sometimes. We have saving and we now have texture filtering. We've been talking a lot about chunky pixels versus the textured filter look, and now we have an option. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. But Super Mario 64 here now has texture filtering, as does the rest of the core. You might see it slowing down, speeding up. I was playing with the cache offset, but obviously the cache is already in here as well. If you go into the menu, you can see texture filtering is now off, and those big chunky pixels are back. You get to decide what you want to use from now on, and obviously, as you've been commenting on, texture filtering is going to be a toggle. It's not going to be that you have to choose one or the other. You're going to be able to pop it on and off like you see here in real time, and that is great. We get more options on the core, and that's what I always want, the ability to decide what I want to do game by game, and that's going to be a great option because I do still think some games look better with big chunky pixels, and I think others look better with the texture filtering. As you move into the introductory sequence of Banjo-Kazooie here, you're going to see we start with texture filtering on, and it's much more like you remember it. Now, it's not every single texture refining mode here. This is just basic 3-point texture filtering. There's other modes that Nintendo 64 can do, and I'm sure in future core updates you're going to get more graphical abilities. That seems to be what Robert's working on right now, as well as compatibility with games, and I would say about 30% of the library doesn't seem to boot right now. Not a complaint, just a number. But you see here, if we turn off the texture filtering mode, watch the walls there, they're going to get much more pixelated, but honestly I kind of think it looks nice in Banjo-Kazooie. Not every single texture you're going to see has massive pixels. It is game by game, and sometimes even scene by scene dependent, so it is nice that we have that toggle. We're going to be able to pop back and forth. Now, the white little bits here on the characters, Robert's talked about that and talked about wanting to go in and fix that because apparently it does drive him a little bit nuts. I'm sure when he sees a problem he thinks to himself he needs to fix it, so I'm sure we'll see some improvements on that in the future as well. But texture filtering is here, and the best way to describe it to you is to show you a side-by-side in Super Mario Kart 64. On the left we have texture filtering enabled, and on the right obviously we do not. And you will see the pixels on the ground, that surface, are much more blocky. You can tell each individual pixel, where on the left they are definitely blended together. Now the reality of this is I like both. I have no problem with either or. It is nice to have the option, but the best other way to show you guys is let's blow the screen up here with the texture filtering turned off like we've seen it before, and you will see on the ground those pixels are just big. I do like the look of it though, but again, leave me a comment down below and tell me if you're team chunky pixel or team texture filtering, because now we have both options and you guys can see side by side what the difference is. But let's move back over to a texture filtered version. Watch that ground, and suddenly it's going to become smoother. It is a good look either way. Now there's some games in which texture filtering 100% just makes them look better, and that's kind of the thing with these games. They're all going to be variables and you get to decide what you like, but that's why Robert is an awesome developer. He gives us the option to see the game in either way, and obviously it doesn't seem like he's going to be taking that toggle away anytime soon. But let's move over to Bomberman 64. That's gotten some improvements. Not only does it have texture filtering obviously here, but it used to freeze right around here, so there's been some under the hood kind of improvements to get more games working better, and we absolutely love to see that. And this is still my favorite Nintendo 64 game of all time, and this is looking, sounding, and playing exactly as I would expect Bomberman to play with the CPU cache on. But the other thing that was brought into the core is saving as well, and we're going to go over that in just a moment. But just look at those textures. This is a game in which that kind of blurriness I think helps Bomberman. This is how I remember it. I've got a ton of nostalgia for it, and honestly, when we turn the texture filtering off, I just don't like the look of the game as much. So that's what I'm really finding on this current core. In some instances, texture filtering looks amazing, in others, I turn it off and run the game without it. But after every level in Bomberman, when you find the exit, is going to automatically save if you have a memory pack inserted in your controller on real hardware. And now that we have saving here, let's take a look at how it works, because it is automatic in this instance after we get these little chicks out of the way. And having saving incorporated into the core is going to be very useful for testing as well, because now you don't have to sit through the beginning of every single game to try to get back to where you were. But as we exit right here, a save is automatically made, and if we go into the menu and reset the core and reload the game, you're going to see that that save persists. That is what is included in the new core outside of the texture filtering as well. But the sound in Bomberman has improved. It is amazing. It's my favorite soundtrack on the Nintendo 64. Listen, I'll be back with more games to show you that just work. Bomberman Hero has such a good soundtrack and it sounds great here, but tell me down below what your favorite Nintendo 64 soundtrack is, because I am always curious. Now moving over to a game that's got a lot of improvements is Rush 2, and back in the 90s I owned this game, and I played the ever-loving hell out of it, trying to unlock absolutely everything. It is now playable on the core, we've got texture filtering turned on, and this is starting to feel like the San Francisco Rush I know and love. It's definitely not running perfectly, and there's definitely still some graphics missing here and there if you look at the edges of the screen, but this is a game, last time we talked about it, basically just showed a black box with a couple bits of graphics, and now within like 2 weeks we are playing this. And if you've never played Rush 2 before, I can't recommend it enough. It's an absolutely addictive game. You think you're going to play for 10 minutes and suddenly 20 hours have gone by in a weekend and you realize all you've done is play this. All jokes aside, I'm definitely not using that many hours this weekend. It is Labor Day, and after I'm done with this voiceover, I'm going to the beach with a cooler full of liquor and a bag of chips. But it is just working, and it's so much fun. These are the games I know and love and remember from growing up with a Nintendo 64, and to see them running on MiSTer again is just amazing, and the speed at which the improvements are coming is absolutely mind-boggling. I had a video on Friday and saving was added right before it went out. I'm doing a video on Saturday for Sunday because texture filtering is here, and who knows what'll be next. I always love that little troll moment there as well. But let's move back over to Super Mario 64, because this is a game in which the texture filtering is 100% the most apparent. Take a look at that moon up there. It does look like a circle. Anti-aliasing's not here yet, but if I turn texture filtering off, you can see all those big raw chunky pixels. The skybox suffers the most from a lack of texture filtering. I think the world of Super Mario 64 looks nice without it, but that skybox definitely gets improved. But again, just moving more through Super Mario 64, this is just feeling like exactly the game I remember, except Mario has no eyes, and honestly, when he finally gets them, it's going to start feeling weird, because I'm so used to seeing this core and this game run without Mario having a face. It's now become my new normal. But moving around, the walls, the water, all of the things that have that Super Mario 64 look are here with the texture filtering, and I know so many people have been curious about when it is coming, and now we know the answer to that. But again, if we just move over here, let's take another look at another wall. You don't notice as much when the texture filtering is off when the game's in motion, but when you actually stop and analyze things, that's when you really start seeing the fundamental differences. If we turn the filtering off, watch that wall, it's going to get very pixelated. Again, here in another level, with the filtering on, the ground looks smooth, it looks nice, it looks like you remember, but if we turn the filtering off again, you start seeing those big individual pixels. Here, I don't mind it as much, but on that wall, it looks a little bit too big for my eyes, but that again is the fun. Filtering on, filtering off, you can do it level by level in a game. You don't need to decide per game, you can decide per Mario level what you want to do. And again, with the rendering modes, we're going to see some interesting things happening here. Outside the pyramid, you see the game, everything looks exactly as you would expect. And if we just take this box here, use the tornado to fly into the pyramid itself, you're going to see something completely different happen. And I always love showing examples of the differences. We get inside, and there's absolutely nothing to see. Whatever rendering mode the Nintendo 64 is using with the RDP chip just is not implemented here yet, so we are basically in the dark. So this is definitely a level I will test with the next core to see if there's improvements, but as we move on in Super Mario 64, it looks great whether or not you have texture filtering turned on or off. This game just feels amazing no matter how you do it, but the next game example is going to be one where I think texture filtering 100% helps the look. But again, just swimming around, running up and down the hills, seeing the classic Super Mario 64 enemies, it is mind-blowing that 2 months ago, basically none of this worked. Now, I did updates when Robert was working on the PlayStation 1 core, and while the movement on that was fast, I don't recall it being anywhere near as fast as the 64 core. This is just basically hyperspeed evolution, and the game speed with the cache, with the texture filtering, it is just chef's kiss levels of good. And I'm going to give you one more example in the front of the castle with texture filtering, where I do think it doesn't really matter which view you use, it does look good. But just moving through Peach's castle so fluidly, even like 3 weeks ago, this was running at like 8 frames a second, now it's running at basically full speed. But as we take the camera in here and we see the castle, look at the ground, look at the castle, look at everything that you can see on the screen, because texture filtering is on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it off so you can see the real-time changes, and it is so nice that this is real-time, not a core reboot. We go up here, we turn the texture filtering off, and it still looks good. The clarity enhances a little bit without the texture filtering. The ground isn't as smeared, but honestly, in my opinion, filtering on, filtering off. Super Mario 64 looks absolutely incredible. Now moving on to Star Fox 64, this is a game that now that we have the texture filtering, I 100% prefer it over it not being enabled, and that is because some of the textures on the ground in this game are made up of some of the largest pixels I've been able to find in my testing. But even here on the intro where all the characters run in with the filtering on, you can see that wall looks smooth. Obviously no anti-aliasing yet, but otherwise you don't see those big chunky pixels, and I do think even in this instance it does look better. But as much fun as an intro is for Star Fox 64, the game is definitely why you bought the game in the first place, and that's what we want to talk about. So you will see here texture filtering is on, and this is playing again absolutely incredible with the cache included for the CPU. The speed is good, the controls are good, the sound is nice, there's no complaints here whatsoever. But look at that wall on the left hand side there. Texture filtering off, it gets blockier, as does the skybox. It gets really blocky, honestly. This is a game in which I think the texture filtering 100% aids the look, and it makes it feel more like the Star Fox we all know, love, and remember from back in the day. So that's what I'm kind of finding out with this current test core. Some games just look amazing with texture filtering on, some games I prefer it off. But as we go through these little hoops here, these little ground masses, this is just so much fun to see, because again, like 2.5 weeks ago, this barely worked whatsoever, and now you can basically almost beat Star Fox 64. There are games on this current core that you can 100% play from start to finish, and now that you have saving, you don't even need to do it in one sitting. But now I've turned the texture filtering back off again, and just look at the skybox as this pans around and we see the ground. Those pixels are absolutely massive. I do kind of like the look in a charming way, but if I turn filtering back on, that ground now looks like actual ground and not like just a grid of pixels in an array. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it back off again, but watch the ground, watch the camera as it sweeps around. Now that we have those pixels in there, this is just too big for my tastes. And that's the great thing about that toggle. I can show it to you like this, and within 5 seconds I can go back to a filtered mode and I can show you the absolute difference. And this is what you're going to get in the core. You can turn it on, you can turn it off, you can do whatever you want. But at least for Star Fox 64, I admit that I am definitely team texture filtering, so it seems like I might be sitting on the fence between chunky pixel and filtering. But let's take another look at Diddy Kong Racing. Last time I showed this, I asked a question whether you preferred this game or Mario Kart, and I said I thought Mario Kart was a superior game. I guess I chose unwisely, because about 7 out of every 10 responses said Diddy Kong Racing was better, so you guys win. But right now we have texture filtering on, and look at the ground, how smooth it is, all of the walls, you can see the smoothness. And as we cross the start line right here and I transition to the unfiltered mode, you're going to see all those pixels come back up on the road. Now Diddy Kong Racing is a game where I 100% think it looks as good with the texture filtering turned on as it does turned off. We're moving so fast, those pixels provide a little bit more sharpness in the image, but we're never looking at them long enough to really identify how big they are. And that is something I'm noticing. The faster the game moves, the more motion there is in the camera, the less you're actually going to notice. And that is basically just like filmmaking 101. You can hide things if you have a lot of cuts or you have a lot of fast action, but if you're doing a slow moving piece, you definitely have to make sure everything looks perfect. Turn texture filtering back on and you're going to see it gets a lot smoother. Now some games, the filtering really doesn't seem to do much of anything. This is Cruisin' World. We showed it to you guys last time and it runs so much faster with the cache included. But if you didn't look at the screen very closely, you wouldn't even know whether or not texture filtering was on or off. I'm going to tell you it's off, and now as I turn it on, there's barely any detectable change in the video quality, and that is just because it is moving fast and not doing too much with the filtering in and of itself. So you're going to find that some games, it really doesn't matter what you choose whatsoever, the visual difference is going to be so minimal, you can basically just ignore it completely. Now moving on to some viewer requests, people wanted to see if some games were booting, and I promised you guys I would get to them. And the first one is going to be Mischief Makers. It's an absolutely spectacular 2D game for the Nintendo 64. You will see here we get into the title menu, and thanks Andy D for helping with a few captures on this video. But the minute you press start, it is basically just going to freeze, and absolutely nothing else is going to happen. So I'll definitely leave Mischief Makers on my testing list. The next time we get a core, we'll see whether or not we can get in. Now moving over to another game that everyone keeps asking about, and I totally understand why, that's going to be Sin and Punishment. It is one of the best and most unique games for the Nintendo 64, and it's definitely one that I can't wait to play again on MiSTer. You can get into the menu, you can get into the game, but it is going to freeze on you. Now it seems like it freezes in different spots depending on what's happening, so it is not a consistent freeze. This is my capture right here, and then we're going to move over to one Andy D sent me. You will see basically as I pan the camera right and try to do anything, the core is going to hard freeze. Now Andy D got his to run like 10 seconds longer, so this is definitely a game that I'm going to retest on the current core to see how much further I can get into it, because it does seem to have a variable into when it's going to freeze, but it's an awesome game and I can't wait to see more of it on MiSTer. Now moving over to another game that people wanted to see retested, because apparently if you mash start at just the right cadence you can get further, and that is Daikatana. You will see here with start mash at the right cadence you can get into the menu, you can choose all of the different toggles that the game provides, but once you actually try to go into single player it is going to freeze and that's all you're going to see. Hydro Thunder, another awesome racing game for the Nintendo 64, is another game that everyone requested to see how it was doing. The menu is working, you can select your courses, you can toggle all of those different options you want on or off, and you can even get into the game on this one. You'll see here when you choose your boat, it is animating in 3D. As we get into the game, you're going to see the countdown clock. It's going to go 3, 2, 1, freeze. It doesn't actually allow you to control, it freezes right there. Now Harvest Moon 64, a game that I'm going to admit right now I have never played. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if I should. You can get into the game. Now the graphics look completely incorrect, it must just be an RDP mode that doesn't currently work, but as you get into the game, you turn around, you access anything whatsoever, you're going to have another hard freeze. So it's one of those games, it technically boots, but I would not describe it as playable. Everyone asked for Hybrid Heaven. I'm kind of proud of you guys for that. It's not a game that I think most people enjoy. I do think it is a quality title. You can get into the start screen, and I do love the introductory sequence. It's got such like a Die Hard vibe to it, and I do need to actually test the Die Hard ROM as well, the game that never came out. You'll see here we have the White House. We get all of the text over the top, and it is running at least up until a certain point, and that's what it seems. Some games want to run, but once it actually tries to use any bit of the hardware that is not currently in the FPGA code, it's going to freeze. You'll see the light change right here, but then you're going to see the motion on the screen stop, and that is when that freeze occurs. But I want to talk about Super Mario 64 one more time before we close this video up, because just going through this level with texture filtering on, the CPU cache available, I can't really tell much of a difference if I was playing on a real Nintendo 64 hardware, outside of the fact that I'm using a Switch Pro controller for this, because I haven't yet picked up an NSO Nintendo 64 controller. Unfortunately, they seem to be scalped on eBay, and that drives me nuts. But it's just incredible to see what's going on right now. I can't believe that like 3 weeks ago you could barely even play this game, and now you can complete it. You can see the credits, you can play most of the levels, you can get enough stars in the game to actually see the ending. And unfortunately, a little shortcut here. Last video it worked, this time it didn't. And the best part is Diary Docs now has some graphics. They certainly do not look correct, but you can certainly see them on the screen. This used to be a level last time we showed you that was basically all in dark. But again, with the texture filtering, look at the water, look at the textures, look at everything we see with it enabled, because the water definitely benefits from the texture filtering, and you'll see why when we turn it off. And that's what I mean when I say it seems like down to each individual level on certain games, filtering on or filtering off make a big difference, because we're going to move the camera here and fix into a position and take a look at that water. We're going to go in, we're going to turn the texture filtering off, and those pixels get a little bit too chunky for me in this actual level. So that's the thing, that's the main takeaway with the texture filtering. Other than it exists, you get to choose whether or not you want it. And I know so many people were hoping that Robert was going to leave this as a toggle on or off in the core, and we now know that is true. We can turn it back on, and that water gets a lot smoother. You'll love to see it, folks. But that is the current situation with Nintendo 64. I had not planned another video this weekend because it's a holiday week, but I had some spare time. You guys love watching these. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what games you want to see tested next time a core comes out, because as these cores evolve, I'm going to be releasing new testing videos on each and every one of them. Short of that, if you're in the United States, hope your Labor Day is going well and you're relaxing. If you're everywhere else in the world, I just hope you're having a good Sunday. But I'm definitely going to the beach now. I've got my drinks cool, I've got my bag of chips, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.